Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larby.
Jude, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I am excited. I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show talk about what we're going to talk about today. So I've got lots of questions in my head that I am dying to ask you before we get into, your topic. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit of, your story of how you got started in real estate investing in the first place.
I actually, as a funny thing, I always, since I'm an interior designer, and this is what we mainly do, I personally got into it when the pre-construction kind of scene started to emerge in Toronto. And my first ever invested property was in Oshawa. And I was really young at the time, and I got into it. It was a cool project. And from there, I still try to catch cool hunts here and there. And now I recommend a lot of units or places to clients and then design it for them.
That is very cool. So how did the whole heritage renovation piece come into play? Because essentially, from what I'm reading and what I'm seeing is, you've done a really great job gutting these places, a lot of places that I don't know a whole lot about and probably would avoid because of the heritage designation for many of them. But I'm just curious how you got started in that particular aspect of it.
Yeah, so it kind of became interesting to me while I was studying interior design and architecture in university. And I've always had this interest in heritage homes, like the different eras, like Victorian, Edwardian, and pre-1920s buildings. So I've always had this interest in it. And I figured, why not do a little bit more research and try to tackle those homes and try to tackle those into something that's great and turn it into something beyond what it really is so far.
Very cool. And do you mind if I ask when you did the first one, the whole heritage reno, your first property that you did with that?
I think we've done a few, but the first big one we've done was, I don't know if you've seen, there's a project that we called From Nunnery to Family Home. It's a house in High Park in Toronto, and it was a full house. It was somewhat of a heritage building, but it wasn't in bad condition. It was in great condition actually, and we gutted the whole interior. But most of the places we've done that were heritage, we weren't allowed to touch the exterior at all. We weren't allowed to touch some parts of the interior, like windows, and mainly the facade or the front of the home.
Okay. So obviously you specialize in renovating. Are you selling these homes? Are you keeping them? Like, are you burying them? What's the strategy?
So the strategy is that we're only designing them for people who come to us with those properties, or people maybe who are interested in purchasing something like this, and we kind of advise on what to look for, what to be aware of, and then once they purchase it, then we renovate it or restore it for them. But mainly we're not buying them as of yet, because we're just trying to focus on getting people proper design and proper permits in place, and then we're going from there.
Okay, so you're helping other investors essentially, buy something and maneuver through all of the ups and downs, specifically focusing on these older homes with these types of heritage designations or whatnot. What is a heritage designation? What does that mean?
So heritage means that pretty much it has an importance to like either a community or a city, or like something that is associated to historical events. But mainly things that get marked as heritage are usually typically either unique, that have unique architectural features that need to be preserved, or they have some part of history that that hasn't, like maybe like a very cool detail that nobody kind of has seen before, or something that we need to preserve, those become heritage. But it also is most common in buildings that are like early 1900s. So it keeps changing. The Ontario Heritage Act keeps getting updated, obviously, and the city keeps finding different buildings to mark as heritage. So there are a few around the city, but it's mainly like very old homes or buildings in the city.
You know, to be honest, this is true. I usually don't bother touching anything with a heritage designation, just because, again, I think there's pros and cons, and probably, you know, my fault. I probably could have done really well. It sounds like from some of them. You know, but there's pros and there's cons, and there's some cons. And before we get into the cons, though, I do want to ask you. So there's a heritage designation, and then there's like one that's not like designated. I don't know what it is. You might know, but it's like they've indicated it or something along those lines, and it's not like fully designated as a heritage home. What is that?
Usually, so the ones that they didn't designate, it's technically not heritage yet, but it could be heritage in the future. So probably it either gets flagged as something that the city is looking into turning into heritage, or like mainly that they're going to research further, look into it further, and they could potentially turn it into a heritage property. Or it could be that it simply will not be heritage, and you can end up doing whatever work you want to do on it.
Right. And that whatever work you want to do on it, you know, sometimes I look at like Oakville, like downtown Oakville, you've probably seen, and all of the outside, like those people that live in those houses, and, you know, I'm sure they have tons of money that they could do something to the exterior, but it looks like, you know, with the plaques and who lived there and the types of jobs that they had, you know, it preserves, there's some good, of course, it preserves the look and feel, but, you know, they can't do certain things to the exterior. So let's talk about the pros of buying a heritage home, and then let's talk about the downsides, and then just like maybe some of the hurdles to buying heritage or considering buying heritage.
I honestly, personally think it really depends on the property itself, like in terms of pros and cons. But in general, like if I were to generalize pros and cons, I would say that the best part about it is you're getting something really unique and almost like a piece of history, and you're living in it, or maybe you're using it as an investment to rent out. So it has a high appeal, and it also has like this unique character, interesting features that nobody else would have, and obviously with it being heritage and with more time, so almost it's like aged wine. I like to compare it to that, because the older it gets, yes, the more work it needs, but it becomes more valuable over time. So a lot of people tend to hold on to them, that they don't want to sell them. And if you were to buy something, it's usually going to end up being expensive because it has a high value overall. And then the last thing that I also really like about heritage homes or buildings is mainly they have really cool windows that you get to, if those windows are allowed to, like, you can move them or replace them, then you could take out the windows, maybe like stained glass windows, and use it elsewhere in your home as like a little piece of art somewhere, or you could just keep them where they are. So it ends up being this contrast to architecture between the modern and the old. So it turns out to be something really beautiful. For the cons, do you want me to go into that, or?
Yeah, let's go into cons. I mean, obviously, you know, I would say that those listening are likely investing. They're there to make money. They're there to figure out, okay, how can I get the maximum after repair value for this property? And it's cool. Like, I think like for like somebody that's going to be living in the house themselves, that they have a little piece of history. As you're saying this, for me, I'm like, I don't know if I would personally, and I'm just, you know, like, it's just my opinion. I don't know if I would personally associate heritage and older as more valuable per se, the way that I would maybe look at it. But I think we could talk about the rebates and different things. But the way that I would probably look at it is, it's going to be more of a headache for me to want to do anything to it. My hands are more tied. And is it really worth that extra cool, wow, it's heritage value. I don't know, but this is a conversation I'd love to have with you, right? Let's talk about the cons.
Yes, for sure. I do think, just to touch quickly, I do think that if you were to get a heritage building, it's better off that you live in it and or you use it to resell it. I wouldn't necessarily use it for renters because it could get destroyed and you don't want that.
Okay, so more like if you're doing like a flip or something along those lines, and then your end buyer essentially is somebody
exactly
into history, into arts, into something unique and different. So if you're a flipper, that could probably work really well.
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
For the cons, so the biggest con in my eyes, it's that you never know what to expect with older buildings in general, because sometimes like you don't see what's behind walls unless you really open them up. So sometimes you can find a pipe leaking or something bursting, or maybe asbestos, mold. There are so many things that are expected when you first get into this, but along the way you may have unpredictable things that come up. And the second thing would be probably the limitations you would have to the renovation you're doing. So depending on what is designated as heritage within the building, sometimes you end up being limited to what you could do. Maybe you wanted to create an open concept and you can't, or you wanted to rip out a staircase and you can't. So those become really almost like holding you down. And there are also provincial and municipal limitations as well. So with that being said, is also, you also can't do much of the interior upgrades as part of that. So so you would end up needing to maybe replace plumbing, but if the flooring is heritage, then how do you do that? So it gets into a complicated domino effect at some point. But before purchasing something, there are things that you should check for, and those are like the asbestos, piping, HVAC, and get an inspection, you know? So it really helps to do that so that you know what you're getting yourself into and you can kind of assess your risks ahead of time.
Absolutely. You know, so I'm interested because, I mean, obviously as investors, and I'm going to speak from an investor standpoint because, you know, I think that's our bread and butter. We'll do the inspection piece and we'll take a look at the asbestos potential. I mean, you never really fully know exactly what you're getting into until you start opening up walls, but I'm curious because I really don't know. How would it work with a heritage home? Like if you, let's just say you have the property, you have it under contract, to due diligence as a clause, right? So you can do your background check or whatever you want to do. From a heritage standpoint, who do you need to bring in from the city? Like, how do you actually find out, like, is this floor deemed heritage before you buy the property? Like, how does that process even work?
So there are a few links. I actually did a blog post that is called Renovating Heritage Homes. So under that blog post, we've linked up a few things. So there are a few websites that you could check, but it's mainly mainly you would know it's heritage because when you're buying it, it would be already like written down that it is heritage. But if it's something that maybe let's say you were living in this home and you don't know if it's heritage and you want to sell it, then the Ontario Heritage Act and there are like the Ontario website for heritage buildings, you would see there, and then there's like a directory. You could sometimes type in the address and then it pops up. And if it's not, then you could call them and say, hey, I have this property, this is the address, I'm not sure if it's heritage or not, can you help me? So pretty much that's how people would know. But the city would usually tell you if it is at some point. Like if let's say you're living in a home, they would inform you that your home is turning into a heritage home or your building, and that's how you'll know. But you could always ask as well.
How do you know though, like, for example, because you mentioned flooring and you mentioned like certain windows, like, so you have that, you can see if it's designated or, you know, maybe it's appointed for future designation, but how do you actually know like what parts of that
it will say?
It
will say like a designated heritage, for example. Then they would put like dash façade or they would write what it is. They would note down what it is. Or sometimes they would say windows, like roof. Like roof and windows are very common. The facade or the frontage of the building is very common. It's very rarely that it's flooring, and it's very rarely that it's interior elements, unless it's like, if you go to the one of the TD banks in Toronto, it's like the old one with the golden ceiling inside. That one, for example, like it has something that is really unique, and it almost like looks like a museum piece. So those pieces cannot be modified, but you could restore them as well. So it still has to look the same to what it was, but you can restore them in that sense.
Okay, no, that's cool. Thanks for providing that insight. So let's just say I buy a piece of property, I close on it, and it's heritage, you know, let's just say it's just some exterior stuff. What is the process? I mean, and let's just say I want to renovate it and I want to refinish it. Maybe I want to flip it. In this case, it's probably the best use for these heritage homes. What's like, is the permit process like who gets involved? Because I mean, it's probably the city like usual with the BCIN designer, but like maybe just walk me through it, because I think there's probably some differences because something's designated heritage when you're doing A, applying for the permits, but B, there's probably different inspections that you know, you have an inspector from the city, for example, when you're doing it regularly, that comes and takes a look. Do you have a heritage person that comes and takes a look along the way based on the different stages?
It's pretty much, so the permit approval, there's a permit called heritage approval permit before starting your work. So if your property is heritage, you kind of almost have to get an approval before submitting for permit. So it's almost like you writing a letter saying, hi, like, I don't know, addressing it to the person that is in charge of reviewing it, asking that this is the work you want to do, this is how it will not affect those heritage aspects, and this is kind of the timeline, and that you are planning on submitting for permits for only this specific area or zone, and then they approve it. So once they approve this almost like request of you submitting for a permit, then you could go in as a normal permit with the city. And that permit becomes, let's say you're planning on adding a kitchen or maybe renovating a bathroom. So it becomes a normal permit, but under the permit application, it will say heritage building. And then you have to provide that proof that you've gotten approval that you are approved to send in this for permit.
Got it. Okay.
Am I complicating it?
No, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's all very brand new information for me too. So I think it's really great that you're able to share and provide some insights. What about when you're renovating and you want to, you know, maybe fix up a designated piece that they said, you know, this is heritage? Like, what is the process to when you're trying to touch that, or can you not?
Yes, so you can, only you have to show that it's pretty much collapsing and that it's going to impose like a public safety issue. So usually with this aspect, like it's a very thin line. So you may need to get a lawyer as well to help you with, or help support you with this process. And then there are construction companies that the city or the Ontario Heritage Committee will allow for to revive the exterior or whatever it is that's going to be revived. And there are some consultants in Toronto that actually only specialize in that work, and they do the construction for it or the build out for the new version, or the just like fixing certain areas. So because sometimes, for example, like there are in the facade, let's say, I don't know, maybe it's made out of brick and some of the brick started to collapse or started to fall out, so they would have to replace those bricks with something that looks almost like the rest of it with the aging and everything. And they would need to do the structural supports, do foundational supports. It really depends on what they're doing, but there are consultants in Toronto that only will build work for heritage buildings.
I mean, it sounds like a cool concept. Is it a lot more expensive to renovate a house versus renovate like that's heritage versus a typical, non-heritage house?
I don't think it's more expensive per se, but I think because there's also a lot of incentives that you can get, which kind of ends up saving you some of the costs. But I think it's just more complex to do it because you need to really be aware of what is happening around you. You need to also be aware of that. Maybe when, let's say, they like gut the interior, that you're going to start finding mold or maybe bad insulation that needs to be fixed, or the flooring is not leveled, that it needs to be leveled. So those aspects is very common in even old homes. But when it comes to 100 years or older, like with homes that are over 100 years, it's like flooring for sure is uneven, that needs to be leveled. So those things end up costing more than something new, because it's already leveled and you could just go in with new flooring. But it's doable.
Okay. So, I mean, it's just the same as renovating or pretty similar minus the timeline as renovating another 100-year-old house, right? One's that's heritage versus another one that's just 100 years old. I have a lot of 100-year-old houses. I know exactly what you're talking about. And some are in better shape than others, but yeah, I mean, you definitely will find stuff behind the walls in many of them, but it's all part of the experience. So timelines, obviously, if you've got hard or private money, at 8, 9, 10%, what time, like that's going to cost you more, but what kind of increased timeline are we talking about? So let's just say a typical house reno is, I mean, it varies, but let's just say it's 3 months to renovate top to bottom. Are we talking about like 20% more time to do the heritage piece? Are we talking about double, or does it not really matter?
For just the heritage piece or the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how much additional time having something that's heritage will take to renovate.
I think the only additional time that is going to take is the additional approvals that you need to get before you have the green light to start renovating.
Got it.
So probably you're looking at around 6 to 8 weeks extra, because a normal permit takes 6 to 8 weeks now, especially with COVID and the busy times of the market. But it could take another 6 to 8 weeks to get other approvals, and maybe you need specific materials or specific finishes. Those would end up taking a little bit longer as well.
Okay, so probably if somebody is buying something like that, like, oftentimes in our purchases and sale agreements or agreements of purchase and sale, we put that we can start the process, going to the city and applying for permits. So probably similar, we could, have that as a clause. So, maybe you can just have a longer close if it's an option, so that you can get permits before you close. So you talked about rebates, you talked about incentives. I think some investors are probably wondering, where is the big benefit from an investor standpoint? That could be a big one right there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so obviously, like, if investors would know, you need to have a smart, like, financial plan and before investing into a property. But there are so many grants and rebates, and there's always more coming up. And then sometimes they kind of implement one for a few years, and then they change it, and then they bring something else. But the biggest one that has been on for a while is called the Heritage Grant Program. And it provides pretty much funds to homeowners to fix and maintain their historical attributes. So like, it could be roofing, doors, windows, the facade. And the cool part about this is that you could always reapply after 5 years. So let's say 1 year you have, you change your windows that are heritage, and then in 5 years you do your roof, and then it's a grant program that you'll have to qualify for. And I could go into detail with that, or I could move on to the next one.
I think this is important. Maybe a little bit more information. Is it just you have to live in the house for these rebates, or could investors get it from renting it out if that's the route they want to go, or flipping it?
Yes. So it mainly needs to be for the homeowner. So technically, you should be living in the house, or you should be the owner of the house, but like technically you should be living in it. But you like mainly it qualifies for the city of Toronto. That's the number one thing. So if you're outside of Toronto, this would become something completely different. But it's always like you could always call and ask the city like for further information to ask like if you own the home and let's say you want to think of renting it out later on, then maybe they could accommodate that. But I'm pretty sure you need to be living in the house. And then it also includes as well like technical studies. So like let's say you purchase something and you want to do you want to check the, I don't know, earthquake loads. I'm just giving you something very random. That also is part of the grant. So maybe you start that, you purchase a property, you do the checks or the studies, and then if it's not what you want it to be or you want to improve it, then you could rent it out or sell it. And then those people will qualify for another grant. So it's really vague at some points with the process, but the information should be all on the Toronto.ca website, and they usually cover certain aspects. And there's an application that you have to submit, so it could be rejected and it could be accepted. So it really depends. And there's also a due date for those submissions. So like there's a deadline to when you can submit and when you can hear back, but mainly like it happens in the spring of every year, and then you only qualify once every 5 years.
Okay. All right. That's pretty cool. So right now you're really working in Toronto and you're helping homeowners and you're helping, ensure that they go through the process easily. Give us a little bit more of, maybe what your company does. And if somebody did want to reach out to you, how they can maybe imagine that the process will go from, reno to completion essentially.
For sure. Yes. So pretty much what we do is we're an interior design and architecture firm. So we mainly focus on interior spaces. So our whole goal is to make your interior problems gone. So we want to solve any functional problems. We want to solve any aesthetic or problems with the flow of your space. And we will work, our process is very simple. So we start with a concept. We then take this concept to a schematic phase where we lay out the floor plans, maybe your furniture in the space, and try to come up with a proper flow. And then we will start gathering inspiration, materials, finishes to start developing this design. So during that process, this is the most time-consuming process for us and probably for our clients because they're waiting for us to finish it. But the design development is the core of the work. And then once that is complete, then we start doing construction drawings, the permitting, permit drawings, and then we start getting pricing from contractors and then coordinating with them to get the project from like this conceptual phase all the way to the completion and full build. So we take it really from A to Z, and we really focus on the details and making everything flow and tie together in an effortless way. So this is a summary of it all.
That is cool. And is it predominantly in Toronto or do you cover other areas as well?
Most of our work, I would say 80% of it is in Toronto, but we do other work around the GTA. So we have projects right now in Hamilton, we have Oakville, we have King City. So we have all over, but most of the work is in Toronto and the downtown core. And we also do like restaurant design and commercial spaces. So we have both services, like for homes and businesses. So we could tailor to both clients.
All right, very awesome. And you say we a lot, walk us through who's part of your team. I mean, I don't need to know their names, but like just like who you have.
No, for sure. It's myself. It's mainly myself. Plus we have another amazing designer that she's been with us for a while now. And then we have another junior designer that is very new. She was our intern. She turned into junior designer. And we currently have brought on a new intern. So we're a team of 4 in total. So it's pretty exciting, and especially that we're working still remotely. It's been an interesting journey to see how we can all work together creatively but remote.
Absolutely. Is your bread and butter like heritage homes, or or is it something different and you just happen to have a lot of heritage homes because you've been in Toronto for a while?
Yeah, I would say it's mainly homes in general, but we've been getting a lot of heritage homes because most of the houses in Toronto are at least 70 years old or more, and not all of them are heritage, but still we do work a lot with older homes, and we're kind of now used to their layouts. So I could, like, if somebody shows me a picture of a house, I can almost know exactly how the layout is on the inside because they're all somewhat similar to one another. So we're very used to that. Yes.
I've walked into, probably not as much as a realtor, probably not as much as you, but I've walked into a lot of houses, right? As I'm looking to buy stuff, and a lot of old ones. And sometimes you see some really strange things, whether it's, a toilet right by the stairs with, literally that's the one piece, or some of the old houses, they had like the tree logs going across, as the beams, which is cool. What is the most like weirdest or unique feature you've ever seen in a house?
I would say it's definitely not a great feature that I've seen. It was horrible, but we had a house where, so there was a mudroom, right, that was built as an addition to the home. It seems like the previous homeowners did it themselves, but when you open the door to go out to the backyard, you almost, like, there's no stairs, so it's like this high of a cliff, and you pretty much will fall. Like, the door is literally out to the backyard with no steps or landing or anything. So if somebody is not used to the space and they open the door and step out, they're going to fall into a ditch. So that's the weirdest thing I have seen. The other thing I have seen is a bathroom where it was put in an attic, and you pretty much cannot sit on the toilet seat. So you have to enter the bathroom, you have to, and I'm a small girl, I'm 5'3". I couldn't even walk without leaning over. And I entered the attic area and the toilet was there. Plus there was a shower, a sink. And I don't know how the previous homeowners used this bathroom because I could barely get in. And you cannot sit on the toilet or stand in the shower. So you'd have to almost be crawling to use the space. So those are the 2 weirdest things I have seen.
For some reason, I find that like toilet placement is always some of the weirdest. Like, I've seen them on like a throne, like a pedestal or whatever, like, like those, like just some weird placements, just randomly in the middle of the basement. Like, it's just so funny what some people think of and put together, right?
Yeah. So these things will go, like, we're like, this is the first thing that's getting demolished here. So we need to get rid of it. But yeah, sometimes I wonder how others make their decisions, but I'm just there to fix all the problems.
That's awesome. We like that delegation and having people work on the business, not in the business. So hire the right people. So Jude, that was awesome. Thanks for your insights. We're going to play the lightning round now. And I'm going to ask you 5 questions that every guest gets the same ones. And you're going to give me the first answer that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite real estate investing book? But it could be another real estate related book if you want to, share a design.
Do you know the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Yep.
That's what got me actually into real estate as a person. When I was really young, I read it when I was 12. Cool.
Robert Kiyosaki changed lots of lives.
Yes.
Number 2, I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but do you have a favorite one? Doesn't have to be real estate related.
I do listen to a lot of podcasts. I think How I Made This or How I Built This. This is one of my favorites of all times.
Cool. I haven't heard about that one, but I will check it out. Number 3, what do you do for fun?
I run.
Okay. Nice. Outside or on a treadmill?
Outside.
Okay. Very cool. Number 4, if you lost all of your money, your assets tomorrow, how would you start again?
I would pretty much be in nature and try to come up with a cool idea to get out of it.
All right. And last question, if somebody has $50,000, they want to get started with that money, how would you recommend they spend the 50 grand?
I would say 30% to invest in real estate, 30% to save in your bank, and then 30% to invest in something else other than real estate, like stocks or something that will bring you value.
All right. Very cool. Thanks for playing the lightning round, Jude. Where can my listeners reach out and find out more?
Pretty much on our website or Instagram. We're called Sansa Interiors. So SANSA Interiors with an S.com. That's mainly our website, and our Instagram is also there as well.
Awesome, Jude. It was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. I've learned
a ton. I'm glad. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larby. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?